So for this week's project, I'm suggesting that you work with the head, and Ivan is modelling for me, and I'm going to do some demonstration drawings of his head turned in different directions and angled a little bit as well. The first one I'll do with some lines and talk to you a little bit about the fact that because Ivan's head is tilted forward, this whole what I'm emphasizing with my first bit of drawing is the top of his head. So when the head goes forward, we see more of the top of the head. So I've got a kind of oval of his hair, and I think it would be worth getting straight down to the brow. So I'm putting in a line where his eyebrows are, and then I'll get down to the rest of the jawline. And when the head goes forward, the ear goes up, so his ear is higher than it might be normally, but I better check that's maybe not quite as high as that. So I've started with a couple of things. The shape of his hair, which, as I've said, there's more hair because we're looking down on the top. I've put in a line around the base of the forehead to find the brow, and then I've gone down to the jawline. It's not a bad idea to get shoulders in as well, because when the head goes forward, the shoulders are higher as well, so that all helps make things a bit more convincing. His head is turned to our right, so this central line, I mean, I'm not that much of a fan of ovals and all that sort of thing, but it's worth diagrammatically letting you see that there is a central line over to the right, and it curves around the face. So that's the kind of cross that you might look for. But as I say, I'm not too keen on too many ovals and construction lines. I think it's better to draw what you see. But putting in some of those lines means that when I do draw the eyebrows, they're going to be lined up. Now, because Ivan's head is forward, the distance between his eyebrow and his eyelash and his eyelid is quite small. They're compressed. Everything is foreshortened. His nose is a bit shorter, and the tip of his nose, which I'm just trying to put here, the tip of his nose is close to his mouth, and the distance between his top lip and his lower and the chin, his chin is also. So everything is a bit compressed. So that's just working with some line with that drawing. I'm on some off-white paper, so I could possibly do a little bit of white as well. That might be worth trying. So what I'm proposing you do this week is, if you have a model and you can get them to tilt their head and turn their head in a few different directions, you might do some drawings, take up some of your model's time. But then I'm suggesting that you use the drawings to make a sequence of paintings. So I'll go on to do that, but I'll start first with these drawings, a little bit diagrammatic of Ivan, just to talk you through some of the things to look for. So I've worked mainly with line. I've also made a point of sitting Ivan where there's some light coming in from the window on the left, so I can also work with tone. But I did this drawing in the way that I did it, partly to talk you through some of the structure. The next drawing I'll make tonal, but let's put in a bit of shading now. And I'm just doing small, sort of closely hatched diagonal marks. That's quite a good way, especially if you're happy with a line drawing and you don't want to sort of lose it all in tone. A few small hatched marks like this can be quite good, and I would probably do well to build up a bit more in the hair. So that's one view, Ivan's head tilted forward and turned to our right. So I'll pause a minute, and I'm going to pose him differently and take a different approach to the next drawing. So second pose, this time Ivan is looking up to our left, I've got some white paper this time, and I'm going to use a thick stick of charcoal, and this time try that approach of not doing any lines but drawing with the side of the charcoal. But as I did before, I start with his hair, so get a dark shape for the hair. So obviously with the head going back, there's less of the top of his head. We've got good light here as well, so I can use the side of the charcoal to get some of the shadow shapes on the side of his face and the side of his nose. So working in this way without lines, it can be a gradual thing, but intended to help you slowly refine the drawing and to look at shapes. So I find it often helps to smudge a bit to make those shapes a bit more solid, even a bit quieter. So what I'm really aiming to do is to make sure that this head really does tilt back. So I'm just trying to work out what things I need to know. So his ear's a little bit lower than it would be if the head was just straight up. I'm getting a little bit of dark. It's particularly at the side of the eye there. There are some shadows. But I want to tie in with what I said before and the idea of starting with the hair shape. I might reduce that forehead a bit. Finding the brow. So there's a bit of an angle. Which way we're going? The head's going back, but actually the eyes are a little bit more at that sort of angle. And then seeing a little bit more under the chin. So before we were looking down on things, now in a way we're kind of looking up in the same way that Ivan is. Well, he's looking up, but I'm looking across at him. I'm getting in a muddle. So that's just to show you how to start with some shapes rather than lines. And now I need to refine some of those shapes a little bit. The great value of this, of course, is that you can, well, you're seeing differently by seeing shapes. You're seeing in a different way, which ought to help you see better, basically. But also these shapes can be very quickly refined or changed. So I think I'm managing to demonstrate that part. So I'm gradually changing those shapes. So if you like this way of working, I would keep it up for as long as possible. You know, don't put in anything too definite. Just keep moving the shapes around. It helps to darken the hair, especially if your model has dark hair. But also, by darkening the hair, you can then start to get into features. I'm darkening the eyebrows, something a little bit darker for the eye. And of course, this time we're seeing the eye. We didn't really see the eye with the last pose because of the head going forward. But although I am putting in something more definite now, I'm trying to do it in a not too definite way. So I'm defining a little bit, but I'm trying to stick with the quality of these tonal shapes. So inevitably you start to put in what are lines, but rather than delineating everything very clearly, it's good if you can smudge or use a big bit of charcoal so that things keep their looser quality. So that's a second view. I mean, as I've drawn, I've become aware that in a way, although Ivan's head is tilted back, I'm actually looking down on him. So some of the sort of more extreme orientation that we had with the first drawing is not quite so pronounced. I've kind of mitigated his angled head. So I think I'm going to do one more in a moment and maybe get him to tip his head right back, a bit like some of those Tintoretto drawings that I attached to the email. So we get even more sort of compressing and foreshortening of the features. So I could go on a bit more with that and gradually get into slightly finer marks, or I might have really enjoyed working without lines, and I could just keep softening this drawing, building it up, working with smudging, but also working with softening, working with smudging, and working with drawing shapes with the eraser. And as I said with the previous one, I think it's good if you can work with the neck or the collar and the shoulders just to get that additional, that sort of confirmation of the viewpoint. So I think that's as far as I'll go with that one. I'll pause and we'll just get one more pose. So a third view, I've got some, this is grey-green sugar paper. So I suppose I should probably do a bit of both of these approaches. So I'll start with the hair, and then where's the brow? Maybe there. So Ivan's head's at a bit of an angle as well as being right back. So I'm going to put in a triangle here, which I don't necessarily see, but is going to help me place the lower plane of the nose, the mouth. And so we're seeing a lot of the underneath of his chin and his neck. And with this sort of pose, necks always look longer and shoulders always look way, way down. So that's a few lines. The chin goes up and the ear goes down. So it's no harm in just checking, where things are. And it can look very odd how low the ear can be from this point of view. So I've done a few lines, and now I'll do a little bit with the side of the charcoal as well. So that's just trying to combine those approaches, and also getting some of these shadow shapes, which are really helpful. There's the side of the cheek, modelling that part of the head, shadow on the side of the nose, on the side of the eye as well, and on the temple. So that's using those shadow shapes just to reinforce some of the drawing. And because this is not white paper, I'll also put some white marks on after. So that, I think that's helpful, because when you look at that set of shapes, there's no particular detail in there, but that does convey the tilt of the head. And so within that, I think I can go on developing some of the details of the features. So what's always very surprising when the head goes forward or back is just how close the features are to each other. So this time we're looking at the underneath of the eye, so the eyelid is going to be a bit compressed, a bit smaller gap between those two lines. The tip of the nose, as I look, the tip of the nose is very close to Ivan's eye, so it's there. That's where the tip of the nose is. It's always a bit unflattering, looking underneath the nose, so the nostrils are prominent. Old Lucian Freud's always doing that to people. And then the mouth, because maybe I've said this already, but the eyes are on that kind of an axis. The mouth, the middle of the mouth in particular, is on the same curving axis. So that's worth knowing. and then the corner of the mouth drops, particularly on that side, because I think that eye could go down a bit more as well. So again, I'm just trying to show you a way that you can draw. You will be often a bit surprised by where things are, where the ear ends up, where the length of the neck, the shoulders, all that sort of thing. So if you've got a way of drawing that I'm trying to demonstrate here, which is a gradual process that is easy to change, and only when you're happy with the arrangement, you've stood back and so on, will you make things stronger. As I'm doing now, I'm making some of these lines a bit stronger, I'm making some of the tone in the hair darker. And also I can take a bit of chalk, in the case of this drawing, and eyes half closed, I can build up, that's a bit bright, but I can build up some light and some emphasis like that. I'll just pause a minute. So yes, I can add a bit of emphasis with darkening accents, and because it's not white paper, I can also put on some lighter marks. And I better, because again we're seeing a different view of the eye, I should just do a tiny bit more to those eyes, trying to find a dark shape for the pupil. And a bit of shadowing here. So that's the three views that I've found. I'm going to, I'll have some photographs, or you will have attached to the email some photographs of Ivan with his head at these angles. So you might want to work with them, or you might have your own model or your own reference material for angled heads. And then the next stage, I'm going to look at working with these drawings and putting together a sequence of paintings, a triptych of head studies, to see where that takes us. Okay, thank you, Ivan. So I don't know if you'll detect a change in the light, but I'm back in the studio now for the next stage. What I'm proposing you might do is, having done maybe 3 drawings of the sort that I've been demonstrating, seeing the head from different angles, you might consider putting them together into a sort of three head composition. I've got a bit of card, a primed card, and I was inspired by this green paper. So I'm actually going to start the process, and you might try this too, by putting on a mixture just to get rid of the white. And that mixture was some Viridian green, some burnt umber brown, and some white. So this is just to give me a neutral, possibly slightly greenish start, which can be quite a good way to work. A good way to work with paint, to not paint onto white unless you really want to. And also with heads, it's not a bad colour to have a sort of hint of colour in a neutral. So that's what I'm going to work on. And I've prepared some colours. So my drawings were done in charcoal, and I didn't use any colour. So I think it would be most useful for you if I gave some suggestions about how you might work with very limited colour. So I've made three tones using some ultramarine, blue, and some cadmium orange. So when I mix those two together, they'll give me a dark brown. I could even make a black if I wanted to. And I can lighten that brown with white. And what I've done is, as I've added white, I've added some more orange. So I've gone from the pretty neutral dark brown to the next tone, the mid-tone, which is a bit more orange. And then I've added more white to that and even more orange to get to this lighter sort of pale orange fleshy tone. So I'm going to see what I can do with those three colours to demonstrate to you. And that would be a way that you might work. And also, I'll say something at the end about pastel, because I appreciate that not everybody is going to paint. But there's hopefully some value in seeing me make this start with paint, even if you're going to go on and work in pastel. So I'm starting with my darker colour, and I've diluted it a bit with some spirit, and I'm just going to work with my drawings now. So what kind of a set can we have? We'll have this chap over here, excuse me, going this way. So first I'm just wanting to place them to see that they'll work together. One of the images I will have sent you is the triptych, the three portraits of, I've forgotten who it is now. Is it Charles II? No, it's not, is it? No. Oh, wait a minute. There's a couple of them. I'm getting confused. Wait a minute, because there's also a Titian. I'll have to look these up. I haven't put together the email yet, so I'll stop wittering. But there's a couple of portraits of three heads of the same subject. Unusual sort of triple portraits. So you'll see those on the email, and they might interest you in the way that and you might relate it to what I'm trying to do here. And a third one over there. So I'm just trying. The purpose of doing this is to give you something to do, to put these sketches to work. But it's also, I think it's good if there's a kind of process whereby you can work on something for a while and then you go on to something else, rest the first thing, and do something else, and then go back to it. So if you've got these three heads side by side, I think there's a value in being able to go from one to the other and develop them, occasionally resting, a sort of stop-start process. So I'm just trying to arrange them in a way that I think could be interesting as a composition, as an arrangement. And I felt that this middle one with the long neck might be quite nice, a bit higher up. So I'm just trying to get a feel for some of that whilst also talking to you. So that's how they're going to be. I think so I don't go on too long, I'm going to pause and I'm just going to carry on with a bit more linear work. Then I'll show you where I've got to. So I've done a certain amount of linear work, line work with a thinner brush. Now I'm going to block in some of the darker shapes. And you saw that I had covered my card with my grey-green mixture. So that paint's still wet. So it's going to mix with what I apply here. So what started off as a fairly dark brown has picked up some of the lighter colour. I think that's okay because I can go darker when I want. But I think actually that's quite a good colour. So my dark brown, I made that from the ultramarine and the burnt and the cadmium orange. When that mixes with the grey-green, That's quite nice. That gives me a fairly gentle shadow colour. So I'm quite happy about that. And I'm now applying a pattern of tone using that brown and applying that to each of the drawings. So I didn't get quite so much tone on that one. So I'm working from my drawings with this limited set of colour, and that's what I suggest you do. There may come a point where you need to know more about the detail of these heads, and you might then look at the photographs if you're working with the photographs. Otherwise you might have to just get your model out again. But I think there's an awful lot you can do and you can learn by going from your drawings to making a painting from the drawings, because it'll always be much more economical. You'll be much more limited in what's there, and that will help you edit, simplify. So let me pause while I prepare a bit more dark brown, and then I'll put on some of the middle and light. So I can strengthen some of that dark. I've made a bit more of the dark brown, so I can strengthen that. Maybe this is a good point to strengthen some of the dark shapes, for example, of the eye, the pupil and the iris, or the eyebrow. But they could also be done later. It's just to show you that that's entirely possible. I'm using a brush at the moment, but I think I'm going to try in a minute with the bits of card again and just strengthen some of that. Sometimes I think it's quite good to establish these darks before you get too much colour on or too much paint on, but it's also not a bad thing to learn how to strengthen the darks later when everything's wet, to have to float the paint a bit more. So that's a little bit of contrast there. So now I'm going to go back to my bits of card and I'll start maybe with the middle orange colour. So where's that going to go? That's going to go somewhere between the shadows and the light. So actually it was only really in my middle painting that I was a bit more explicit about what was lightest, what was shadow and what was middle. So a lot of that is middle. Actually, the other thing I meant to show you, I'll do it on that head in a minute, was to wipe off some of that green, if that's helpful. If you want to sort of clarify a pattern of light and shadow, then it might actually help to do a certain amount of wiping away, as you might do with an eraser to get back to the white paper. So that's blocking in some of the middle colour, and then let's try a little bit of the light on this one, and then I'll show you what I was referring to with another one. Just need some of the bits of card. Clean. So this was the lighter tone, a kind of highlight, which is particularly in these places on that side. Okay, that could be a bit more refined, couldn't it? So that's some of that light Let me do a bit of wiping away on the other one to see if that's going to make any sense. So I've got a puddle of white spirit so that I can dip my rag into it and then stretch the rag over my finger just so that in places I might want to just wipe back. So that's possible. I can get a bit of light off there and also over here. So that'll be interesting when I go to put on the colour. I've already got a little bit of contrast there. So this chap in the middle is looking a bit rough. He needs a little bit of refining. But let's just quickly block in the other two. And then I'll say one or two things about maybe using pastel or mixed media if you don't want to paint. So that was to put on the middle tone and then to introduce some of the lighter tone. And in fact, what would be probably better, let's do it like this then. So it's got a lot more of the middle tone on, even though I wiped away to the white. Probably not a bad idea to have quite a lot of that mid-tone on there first, and then float a bit of the lighter tone into it. That'll probably be a more subtle blending than I achieved with that chap there. Anyway, I'm all in favour of working very loosely like this and then gradually refining your work. So even with what I've done in the middle, it would be quite good now to soften some of these light shapes. So some of that. We've also got this very distinct, I need to explain that nose. Having done all that considered work at the beginning, let's get the mouth right first. Yeah, all that considered work in the beginning about the shape of the nose and the nostril. So I want to get back some of that, and I'm doing it really back with my brown. So I'm not going to stray too far from these mixtures, the ultramarine, the cadmium orange, and some white. So that one needed to take some of that off. And I can gradually go on then strengthening things, building up. It might be if, I'm doing a lot of wet in wet painting, if that is a frustration, take it as far as you can, but allow yourself time to let it dry, and then you can come back and sharpen up in different places. And you might also, I've only worked with the three colours, or with the three tones using the orange and the ultramarine, but you might want to extend that and make more complex versions of these colours. If you were to work with pastel, I'll just pause a second while I get out some suggestions of colours. So finally, if you're going to work with pastel, if you could find yourselves some sort of brown, a bit like that, maybe a slightly pale orange, and then a cream. Colours like that were pretty close to what I've been showing down here in paint. And if you also had some white chalk and some black charcoal, then actually you can adjust those colours. So you might get a bit of black in the hair, warmed up slightly with the brown, and then it may be that your if you hatched on the colour. You'd allow the charcoal and the paper to show through, and you can also then make some mixtures, and that could work its way all the way up to some of these lighter colours, and the white may be part of that. So that would be another. Whoops, microphone came off. That would be another possibility for developing these studies, but using pastel, chalks, or other non-oil paint media. Okay, well, I hope that goes well. This has turned into a long broadcast, but I hope there's enough in it to give you a good prompt for your own work. All right, well, I'll see you on Monday at 7 p.m. Bye-bye.